In this video, I will share 5 mistakes that beginner harmonica players make and how you can avoid them. If you want to avoid sounding like you don't know what you're doing, then make sure you stay till the end. The 5th mistake might surprise you. Hey guys, my name is Jonah Fox. Before we start, I want to let you know that the best way to improve your harmonica skills is to work on developing your knowledge and practice of scales. It will help you with your single notes, your bends, and your ability to improvise. I have a free printable scale reference that you can download, again, totally for free, to help you with your scale practice. Just click the link down below in the description, okay? Let's get started with today's 5 tips. Number 1 is playing sloppy overall. And I usually think of this in 2 different ways, being sloppy with your rhythm and sloppy with your single notes. Let's talk about single notes first. So on harmonica, obviously, if you can't isolate a single note, you can't do more besides playing, like a Bob Dylan kind of style. Right? You can do that with just chords, but it's very simplistic. So when you want to play something that's more complicated, like the blues, you really want to have the ability to tighten up. And it doesn't mean you need to be tight all the time. Like, you can relax this at certain points. Like, sometimes you might want to play tight. And sometimes you might want to play the same thing a little bit looser. But you want to have that decision to loosen up be a decision that you're making, not just like your default. It's one of those things, like, you got to learn the rules before you break them. If you're new, I really suggest you make it one of your top priorities to clean your single notes up. And then as you develop, experiment with allowing more chords to leak through in your playing. Playing sloppy single notes is a big thing, a big sign of being a beginner. And the other one is being kind of weak with your rhythm, right? And I'm going to stay pretty brief about this because this is a bigger topic. But when you're playing, if you can't keep a consistent beat going, like you're kind of like subdividing in your head, if you can't do that, your playing is not going to snap onto that grid. And as a result, it's going to sound kind of weak. And when your rhythm is not very accurate, whatever you're playing is just not going to come across in the way that you want it to. It's going to sound kind of loose and disjointed. And the best way to work on this skill is to just practice your scales with a metronome. Having that time of metronome practice is really going to help. And you can use your metronome also when you're just learning a song. Like, if you have a song going, learning it with a consistent click in the background is going to help you stay on that grid and make the really important parts of that song really stand out and have the impact that they're meant to have. All right, so let's move on to number 2. The second mistake I see that you should work on is having a wimpy wah technique. So your wah is when you're moving your hand like that, right? So I'm just going to do 2 draw. Now, if you use your hand effects or wah, whatever you want to call it, most beginners sound something like this. And, it's okay. It kind of conveys what we're trying to do, but it doesn't go all the way. If you can really work on that cup, you'll have a much more impactful technique. And that's just with the standard cup. You can really go pretty far with this. Okay, so there's a lot that you can do with your hand here, but for most beginners, they're just not making full use of this effect. And on that same point, a lot of beginners just forget to use this. It's something that you have access to all the time when you're playing, so you just want to make sure that you're using it. I'll make a full lesson on this in the future, but for now, my biggest tip is to just focus on cutting off the sound as much as possible before you open your hand to use effects. So, I'm going to put my hand up close to the camera here, and maybe it'll focus. There we go. And I'm putting my hand, the bottom of my hand, like below that, wrapping it up over the harmonica. Now there's not this big gap on the side, there's no gap on the bottom. And because I'm doing that, it's making a good cup on the instrument and making that wah effect a little bit more pronounced. Number 3 is just not holding your notes long enough. And there's a good chance that you're doing this. It is most applicable when we're talking about playing a song, but there's also some ties in here with improvising as well. Take a listen to this melody so I can explain what I mean. Okay, that's how it should be, right? So the long notes are held out for quite a bit. A lot of beginners just don't hold these notes out as long as they should, so you get something that's just not as effective. Take a listen. Okay, it's the same melody, but there's notes that should go longer and they're just not held out that long. And I find that it's very common for beginners to just not hold notes all the way. And it doesn't always have to be that extreme. Sometimes you hold it, like, let's say there's a note that's being held for a measure, but you will only hold it for like 3.5 beats. Okay, when you do this, it weakens the impact of your held notes and the feeling of what you're playing. You really want to make sure that you're holding notes that should be held out their full duration. In your head, when you shorten up notes, you probably feel like you hit the note, so you're good. And I get that, but you really should be counting behind everything to know exactly when to stop. And that kind of goes to my rhythm point before. Be counting when you're playing, okay? It doesn't always have to be like 1, 2, 3, 4, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. And it could be something just simple as just having like a bit of a pulse in your head. You don't even need to attach numbers to it, and just make sure that your notes are matching that pulse. This concept should be pretty obvious when we're talking about playing a song, but when you're improvising, it still kind of applies. You know, if you're going to do a held note, make sure you hold it to the end of the bar or whatever fits the part of the song that you're playing in, okay? Music does not need to be this rush thing, you know? Find some held notes and really hold them on their entire duration, okay? It's just my suggestion. Make sure if you're going to hold a note, hold it for however long that it should be held for. Don't rush it. If this video is helping you, do me a solid and click the like button. It helps this video spread to more people. Thanks, guys. The fourth mistake I see is all about improvising and players using all of the same rhythms while they jam. So usually I see a beginner that gets used to playing all of the same types of notes, like eighth notes. So now everything has to be an eighth note, okay, and nothing more. It's really boring. So if you're just playing some like bluesy kind of thing. Okay, so that's kind of like this dotted eighth to a 16th. Da. Very common blues rhythm. But what if you use those some of the times and use other rhythms other times, right? Okay, in music, we can change our notes and our rhythm and our tone. Okay, those are the 3 things we can control. And all of these 3 elements should be constantly changing and dynamic to keep your playing interesting. Remember, contrast is the spice of music. So if you find yourself playing everything pretty much the same way, try to intentionally break it up. Sometimes you're going to want to drag some notes out. Sometimes you're going to want to hold some notes for a good long time. Sometimes you're going to want to play fast phrases to break up the monotony. You just want to vary up the timing so not everything plays out in a static and predictable way. Finally, mistake number 5 is rushing after a song ends. Now, I had to get a teacher in music school to really drill this in my head, so I'm sure that you're doing this too. So let's say you're playing the last few notes of a tune or a jam. So beginners will usually play the last note, and before anyone can even really process what happened, they're moving on to the next song or asking for feedback. And instead, you just need to let what you just played sink in. When you finish, just wait. So let me give you an example. So let me play a bluesy version of Amazing Grace, and I'm going to show you different ways that I can end it, okay? What do you think about that? Or, okay, so that's the bad version, okay? So right when you're over, you're kind of like, and here's my next song. Or whatever. It doesn't matter, right? The idea is that a lot of beginners will play something, and then as soon as they end something that could have been really good, they just move on too quickly. Instead, try this. When you are finishing a tune, you're going to want to just let it sit, okay? It just makes a much stronger impact when you're performing. Now, this is really applicable when we're talking about something that you're doing just on your own. Like if you're playing a song that you know, if you're doing a jam on your own, it doesn't matter. In a band situation, a little bit different. But if you're playing on your own and you're ending some sort of a phrase, and that's the end of that little bit that you're playing, that song, that melody, whatever it is, let it ride, let it sit, let people in the room who are watching, if anyone's watching, kind of process what you just did and kind of feel that space out a little bit before moving on to the next thing. And the thing is, this is a habit and it needs to be built up. So you should really start doing this even when playing at home. So in those moments where you are performing in front of other people, this is your default way of playing. Just to drive this point home a little bit further, have you ever watched stand-up comedy? This is like a beginner stand-up comedian saying a joke, maybe even one that's really funny and deserves a laugh, but they immediately move on, okay? Negating the time for that joke to settle in and for people to react. So essentially, they might say something funny, but they go right on to their next joke, not even letting people laugh, right? I kind of view it as this like weird form of self-protection. Like you don't want people to think too much about what you did. And it's a really far thing from projecting confidence. So a good stand-up comedian will say something and then pause to get a reaction, to get a laugh. And you should be doing the same thing in your music. Just I hope people aren't laughing at you. Okay. Have you made any of these mistakes? Let me know in the comments below. Also, check out that free scale reference to help you with your practice sessions. The link's down in the description. If you want to see more mistakes to avoid, then click this video up here. You will be glad you did. Jonah, out.